Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Coral, and I am the Curator of Education and Public Engagement here at MOCAD, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our talk this evening with Cynthia Davidson and Monica Ponce de Leon, the co-curators of the US Pavilion for the 2016 Venice Biennale. Their exhibition, entitled The Architectural Imagination, will imagine possible architectural projects for 4 sites in Detroit. It will open to the public from Saturday, May 28th to Sunday, November 27th, 2016. If you find yourself unable to make it to Venice during that time, fear not, because MOCAD is hoping to present the architectural imagination right here in 2017. Cynthia Davidson is an architectural editor and critic based in New York City and presently the co-curator of the United States Pavilion exhibition for the 2016 Venice Architecture Biennale. She's the founding editor of Log, Observations, and Architecture and the Contemporary City, the triennial journal begun in 2003, and editor of the Writing Architectural series books published by MIT Press. 21 books and 36 issues of Log produced to date are projects of the Anyone Corporation, a nonprofit architectural think tank she has directed since 1991. She was the founding editor of the architectural tabloid magazine Any from 1993 to 2000, and of the Any book series, which documented 10 cross-cultural and multidisciplinary architecture conferences that she organized in the 1990s on the cultural condition of architecture at the end of the 20th century in 2014. The American Academy of Arts and Letters recognized her work with a prestigious annual architecture award. Ms. Davidson also writes for a number of periodicals, including Architectural Record and Art Forum in New York, and Arquitectura Viva in Madrid. She was the Loeb Fellow in Environmental Design at Harvard's GSD in 1988-89. Monica Ponce de Leon is a pioneering educator and award-winning architect. She has, since January 1st of this year, served as Dean of Princeton University's School of Architecture. She's also served as Dean of the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor since 2008. Before her appointment at the University of Michigan, Ponce de Leon was a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, where she served on the faculty for 12 years. A recipient of the prestigious National Design Award in Architecture from the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian National Design Museum, Ponce de Leon co-founded Office DA in 1991 and in 2011 started her own design practice with offices in New York, Boston, and Ann Arbor. So, after those bios, you can see why we're wildly delighted to have them here with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming them to MOCAD.
Good evening, everybody.
Uh-oh. We should have done a mic check. I'm Salt. This is my spice of my life named Pepper.
I feel like we're in that Saturday Night Live skit where there is 2 women in the radio. You know that skit? Where they use a very soft voice and they're like going back and forth saying funny things, not knowing that they're funny. So you can tell us at the end of the evening if that's what we did.
We hope we're funny, actually. First, I want to thank Alicia Bowery-Reeder for having us here tonight and for being a member of our advisory committee that's been working with Monica and me on this project called the Architectural Imagination. It's very hard when you're a team to figure out who's supposed to speak when. So I'm going to start, if the mic works. I'm going to start, and Monica's going to interrupt, and then Monica's going to talk, and I'm going to interrupt her. And we hope in some way to not only entertain you, but inform you and maybe even give you a few ideas. So I'm going to start by talking about what the Biennale itself is. You see here the important logos that are involved in any art and architecture Biennale in Venice. The Department of State being the second logo there. The Department of State every year solicits requests for proposals for art and architecture biennales. Monica and I twice proposed to do a project on Detroit. We were selected the second time, and that's what we're here to talk to you about tonight.
What we're hoping to do tonight is to talk about the process and to actually get input and feedback from all of you. The show will be in Venice this summer and then come back to Detroit a year from now here at MOCAD. And it looks like we're having already technical difficulties.
It's not advancing.
Oh, that's so weird. Why would it do that?
Technical crew.
Yeah.
Is there a technical crew in the house? A doctor?
That is so weird that it did that. It did advance, but it was not visible.
It's not up there now.
No, I know. I took it out for a second just to see. I think it's the relationship to the.
Aha.
No, look,
No.
it goes out.
Oh my God. No, wait, it's there. It's there.
Oh, good. We got it. There you go. Okay.
Okay. The Venice Architecture Biennale first began in 1980 with what is considered, with an exhibition called Strada Novissima, in which the Italian director asked architects around the world to imagine new storefronts and created a sort of street of designs. This was at the sort of height of postmodern design. These are the statistics that are for the Biennale that was held in 2014 when Rem Koolhaas was the director of an exhibition called Fundamentals, where he was looking at key elements of architecture. These are the kinds of numbers of visitors, followers online, numbers of press that come. It's the premier architectural exhibition in the world. It's a great honor for Monica and me to be asked to do the American Pavilion.
It's changing behind us.
It's changing behind us? Oh, well, you're getting the whole show. I better turn around.
It's not changing in our screen. It's stuck in the first slide, which is why we've been acting like we don't know what we're doing.
That's why we're pretending we're on the radio.
Apologies.
The Biennale is held in what is called the Giardini, or the Gardens of Venice. Many countries have pavilions in the garden. The Italian pavilion, or now known as the International Pavilion, is the large black footprint to the top of the slide. The American Pavilion is the red object. It's a neoclassical pavilion of brick with a center rotunda built in the 1930s, maintained by the Peggy Guggenheim Collection in Venice. And as you can see, it has a very central position in the garden. This is a view, and you see the throngs of people who like to see what the United States is up to, whether they like it or not. This is a photograph from the Art Biennale last year, where the video artist Joan Jonas had a one-woman show. This is her tree sculpture out front. This is one of the Architecture Biennale treatments in front of the pavilion several years ago. It's actually done by Michael Meredith and Hilary Sample, who are also architects in the architectural imagination. We selected the architects for the exhibition from a national call for expressions of interest. Monica is designing the installation for our exhibition, and she will be also doing something for the courtyard here, but we're not sharing that yet. This is a very small corner of the pavilion, but it gives you a sense of the treatment of an exhibition. This was last year's exhibition. Do you remember the title?
No. But the theme last year was American architectural firms practicing around the globe. So basically the export of architecture, or how architecture was used to export America to the world.
Yeah, modern architecture exported from America and was represented in booklets on shelves. We're taking a very different tack. We have no booklets. And this is the plan of the pavilion. And I show you this plan because it's really critical to how Monica and I approached Detroit, which she's going to talk to you about. When we realized we wanted to do new speculative projects for Detroit, we thought, these can't just be fantasies. It's about the imagination and the creative power of the imagination to bring about change, or at least to bring about discussion about how things can change in a community. But how would we choose the sites in Detroit? And we said, well, here's a map of how we do that. There are 4 rooms in this pavilion. It would be the most successful exhibition if we could do 4 sites. So each room will become a site, and we will enter Detroit in Venice through the central rotunda in a very formal way. So you want to go ahead, Monica?
So we decided to not have the typical approach to a biennale by not taking work that was off the shelf to represent the work of a particular architect. Instead, and this is unusual, we decided to commission projects. And we decided to commission projects for the city of Detroit because we believe that Detroit has a long history of invention, a long history of imagination, a long history of creativity. So we wanted to have, as a context for architects' imagination, a city that is full of it. So as Cynthia said, we had decided to do 4 sites. We also decided to do 3 architects per site, or 3 architectural teams, I should say, per site, with the idea that they will not work together. They will be separate teams, and they will propose different options for each of the sites, so that then we can all compare and contrast, and we can see that there is not a single solution or a single vision or a single option for a particular place, but that instead there are multiple options, that there's multiple possibilities. The intent is not to provide authoritarian resolution to a place, but rather to open up a conversation so that we can actually have a debate as to what should or could happen on a particular place. So we very early on put together an advisory board, and we are extremely grateful that we got such support from our advisory board. They have been instrumental in helping us select the sites. They've been instrumental in helping us structure a process that we think so far has been extremely successful. So when we got together with the board, they put on the table more than 20 sites. And at the end, we took them down to 7. And you can see how members of the board have a variety of backgrounds and a variety of interests. From Maurice Cox, who's here in the front, who is the city planner of Detroit, to members of different community groups. And what was important about that is that then we all looked at sites from a multiplicity of views. So when we got it down to 7, Cynthia and I visited the sites. We understood their size and their magnitude. We understood whether we had available material or not. And from that, we took it down to 4 sites, which was actually very difficult. But the criteria for the selection was, are these sites that we believe represent global issues? Are these sites that we believe represent global problems? Are these sites where Detroit actually could put forward leadership in how they get developed in the future?
This idea of leadership was really critical to us. We wanted to cite this exhibition, this sort of idea of the architectural imagination here, because Detroit has a history of invention, has a history of imagination. It's a place the whole world throughout the 20th century looked for new car styles, new ideas about music, I mean, any number of things. That's why one of the major reasons we wanted to anchor this project in Detroit.
So in order to select the architects, we did a national call for letters of interest, and we got over 250 submissions, and we ended up with 12 teams that are extremely diverse. They come from many different backgrounds, but they're also across the country. Some here in Michigan, but actually from every corner of the US, and we're really happy about that. You want to read the list, or just let it be on the screen?
Do you want me to read to you? Do you all know how to read? Is my head blocking Andy Zago?
You want to talk about the 4 locations?
The 4 locations. It's hard because I have to turn around to do it because I can't see it. Mexican Town on Verner Avenue, the Fort Street Post Office sorting facility between Fort and the river, the foot of Trumbull. You come up to Eastern Market, where the DeQuinder site extension is about to reopen, or maybe already has. I haven't been over there in the last few months. And then the Packard plant, which was really something Monica and I had debated about for a long time. If we also took on a site that is known internationally, would it be the station? Would it be the Packard plant? Would it be Fisher Body? I mean, it seemed that there was an abandoned facility that really did need to be addressed. The post office site is, of course, in active use. Mexican Town's a very vibrant community with an abandoned small industrial building at one end of it. And the DeQuinder Cut site is actually a cleared site with nothing on it, which really is ripe for development with the opening of the extension occurring soon.
So in the DeQuinder Cut, we decided not to select one lot, but actually an agglomeration of different lots with the cut running right through it. And we were extremely lucky that Dan Carmody helped us not only by giving us tours of the sites and putting us in touch with different business groups in and around the site, but by organizing a series of conversations that brought together people that are stakeholders on the site. And this for us was extremely important. So in this site, we very much work together with property owners, but also with community groups around the site that have stake on what may happen on the cut itself. What was important for us about this site was the idea that you can take an outdated mode of an outdated piece of infrastructure in the city and turn it into a positive element in the city, something that used to divide the city into something that can then connect the city.
So we're gonna cheat you a little bit tonight. I apologize. I'm sure there are many of you here tonight who were hoping that we were now going to show you pictures of architectural ideas for these sites. And in fact, when we first set this date with Alicia, that was what we thought we might do. Things are very complicated when you have to ship an exhibition of models that are 4 feet by 7 feet in footprint, which means bigger than this table. And the ship date kept changing, and every time the shipping date changed, the architects delayed finishing their work. There must be some architects here. And so the ship date changed from the first week of February to the second week of March, so we really don't have anything to show you. I apologize for that. We didn't want to show you fragments and have you draw the wrong conclusion. But we do want to talk with you about what some of the programmatic ideas are that the architects are considering. One of the important pieces of these community meetings with our advisory board and members of these different communities, all 4 communities, was to say, what do you think should happen in this neighborhood? What do you imagine? What would you like to see go away? What would you like to see made larger? What would you like to see that's never been here? And the architects really sat and listened to what they heard. I'm sorry that I have to keep turning around because I don't have these lists memorized. The first thing you see here is the DeQuinder Civic Academy. This is by Marshall Brown in Chicago, who sat with a woman from the Detroit Edison schools at one of the meetings and got very caught up in the idea of a new kind of educational program for Detroit. And he is proposing what he calls a cité within the city, which is a community that is a school that starts in nursery school and goes through college. In other words, you could move into this at age 4 and leave at 22. Not that they're going to keep you there. You can go in and out. But it's not a school for delinquents. But it's an extraordinary city within a city with a theater, with an athletic facility, anything that you would associate with a school. Yeah, an ice skating
and things that you wouldn't associate with a school.
But it's also got housing for the faculty, housing for the university students. I mean, it's a day school, but it's a live-in school. It's a very complex, detailed, well-thought-out program that, reading the papers, even in New York, about what's happening in the Detroit school system might be something people are going to chew on. This is why we like how architects think. They sometimes take a different approach. Another Andrew Zago in Los Angeles, who some of you may know from when he did live in Detroit, has proposed a program that is probably slightly more controversial. He wants to do a refugee resettlement program, in particular for 68,000 Syrian refugees. He has developed 5 buildings, including one off the site at the southern end of Eastern Market, through which would be education, health clinics, English
Community
language,
center.
immigration, community center. And he sees this, as many of the architects have done. No one looks at any of their proposals as a kind of quick fix, but rather a kind of 10, 20, 30, even 50-year program that would roll out over time. And so Andrew's proposing that a refugee resettlement project would eventually become something that the residents of the city itself would eventually use for whatever purposes they need. So he's doing buildings that have offices, classrooms, a clinic, a big new food hall for Eastern Market, and so forth. Andrew Zago, Z-A-G-O, who used to live in Detroit. Actually, he was the architect for this building that we're in. The third team on the DeQuinder site, Moss from New York, the same team that did the helium balloons that I just showed you, are doing a complex of new housing on the cut, integrated with a cooking school because it's adjacent to Eastern Market, and again, a health clinic.
So I'm going to move this over. In Mexican Town, as Cynthia was describing before, we of course have a thriving community that has in its edge a facility that is sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, at least in my opinion. And it gets on the way of connecting the community to that end of the city. So we spent quite a bit of time in understanding the site itself, but also quite a bit of time in understanding what makes the community tick and what gives character to the community.
That was the Burger King meeting. I really liked that one.
We had meetings everywhere. And in Mexican Town, we really owe a great deal of gratitude to the Southwest Detroit Business Association. They really went out of their way to help us connect with business owners and to connect with community organizations on the ground, but also in particular to the Congress of Communities, who organized a very large focus group meeting where we really took apart what are the kinds of programmatic needs that this site could actually offer to the community as a whole. We also, in this particular site, we have teams that came back from out of town over and over and over and over again. So it's interesting because for this site, this is only about a third of the programs that the architects are working with. Every project really has been conceived as a mixed-use project. We just wanted to give you highlights of some of the programs. And I'll let Cynthia take you sort of team by team. But it's interesting that because of this relationship on the ground with those who are in Mexican Town, the architects actually did not feel like editing out. They actually felt that architecture could become almost like a sponge that absorbs all of the different forces in this particular site.
Sponge is a good word because some of the work, I mean, Monica and I have been tracking the work that the architects are doing. We're not just letting them have some sandbox. We've been the client and the critic and the curator, many more hats than maybe we thought we were going to have to wear. And
but the architects still do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, yes, they are still doing what they want to do. We're learning that really quickly. But we've been having WebEx meetings with them where we see their work. We see their computer screens on our own respective computer screens. I mean, technology's made all this possible. And so we do know what some of the things are probably going to look like. We can't be sure.
We hope we know.
We're not there when they're packing their crates. But I say that because the Southwest Detroit Business Association has been very attentive to what we're doing and saying, when can we see it, when can we see it? So I'm really sorry that we can't show them tonight because there just isn't something to really show that's concrete that someone could say, wow, that's really great, or whoever thought of that, no way. But one of the things Monica and I said to the architects when there was a building on the site, as there is here, and the post office, and the Packard plant, is that there's been enough demolition in Detroit. Please try to do something with the structure that's on this site. And one of the architects in Mexican Town is saving the industrial building, light industrial building, I should say, used to be used for automotive painting cars. So it's kind of toxic. But the other two are taking it down because it's not a great building. And one of them that is taking it down is raising the whole grade level of the site so that it's equal with the rail line that runs past it, and creating parking underneath and moving the marketplace on the top and putting different kinds of community projects up there. That would be Peter Bloom in Los Angeles. An office, a parentheses N office, has really become invested in the environmental quality of the site, in particularly the air quality of the site, because there's so much heavy truck traffic that goes through here, and is doing a lot of work to try to come up with a program or a form for a program that allows for some kind of air purification system as well as live-work spaces, because they don't feel that people can really live and work in a site that's got such bad air quality. And with the new bridge coming in the future, there'll be even more trucks potentially passing through this site. And Max Cog and Merrill Elam in Atlanta, who made 3 separate trips to Mexican town after their initial visit, after their initial meetings that Monica just showed you, did numerous interviews with citizens in the community. They have made a movie about Mexican town, and they are promising Mexican town everything they want. The dancing hall, the tech center, the nursery school, a spa, a place to get lost. I mean, all kinds of things. So.
Okay, this is weird how it works.
Right there.
Yes. So what we call the post office site really is the post office, the lot next to it, and the riverfront, and it's at the end of Trumbull. The reason we thought this site was important is because it's an example of how a large civic building can actually be a barrier between a community and a feature such as the waterfront. And you can see that the building is not the most beautiful, and is very much sort of a large giant that creates a wall from lower scale building community and the water and the park itself. So as Cynthia said before, there's been so much demolition in Detroit that we asked the architects to resist the easy solution and just tear it down. But instead to think about ways of renovating, remodeling it, transforming it in positive ways so that it perhaps will no longer serve as that wall, as that barrier. For this site, we were not as successful in terms of community engagement, and we're very grateful to two members of our board, Dan Kincaid and Tom Sherry, who use material and information from the Riverfront Conservancy and the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation as a way of orienting the architects to the site. But I will say that probably from all of the projects, this is the one where the architects have been working a little bit more removed from the reality of everyday Detroit.
I'd say that's true. You saw a dungareed gentleman in the photo with us when we were standing down by the river. We were really fortunate to run into this guy. His name was Sam Smith, and he lived across the street from the post office, just a little east on 4th Street in a loft building, and he'd been there for quite a while, and he really told us a lot about the neighborhood, which was really useful, but the federal post office didn't even want us to come inside the building, which is really, really interesting response from the government we all pay taxes to. So the architects have been working very hard to figure out what to do with this wall building and how to give Corktown sort of immediate access to the riverfront. I'm sure you've all walked along the riverfront there. It's really a wonderful space. These are the different kinds of programs. No one's tearing the post office down, but in fact they're cutting into it. One architect is cutting it in half. So if you have a box, and he's taking, if you have a shoebox, he's taking the sort of middle of the shoebox out, the width of the road, so that you would come through it, and you'd still have these two buildings to either side that form a kind of gateway, which he then puts bridges between, which creates a kind of arch. It's not a triumphal arch. It's not really an arch, but it gives you a whole different idea about how one approaches the river. I think at least two of the architects are proposing to take the people mover just a little bit further. There's a lot of discussion about making the block in front of the post office, between the post office and the river, into a park. One of the teams wants to just make that a park. The other two teams are building on that site. I mean, as Monica said earlier, having 3 different architects work on a site shows you there's never just one solution. That depending on who you talk to, you can get so many different ideas. And this is clearly a place where, if indeed it comes to some point where there is movement in the post office, that building could be worked on in some way, could be drilled into or cut open to make it a friendlier approach to the river, that there are a lot of different ways it could be done, and that all of these different ideas really open up an array of discussions in the future.
And then, as Cynthia said, we felt that at least one of the projects should deal with a large industrial abandoned site. These kinds of sites have been in the press quite a bit internationally, and Detroit has become identified with these sites. All of you know the term porn ruin. And we wanted to see if there could be imaginative interventions, imaginative proposals to move beyond this kind of image of Detroit. So we selected the Packard plant because it has an owner that is actively working on it. And we engaged with this owner who was very generous in giving us access to the site, but also in organizing community meetings for us. And we had really interesting conversations about what are the kinds of programs that could take place on the site itself. And to our surprise, the way that the site is developing today and the way that the site is being conceived is actually an imaginative agglomeration of different activities that are not your typical developer project. So this has served as a good backdrop and a super good background for the architect's work on the site.
What was really great about the community meeting, the Holy Cathedral?
Holy Ghost Cathedral.
The Holy Ghost Cathedral, which some of you may know, was also an Albert Kahn building, originally a Packard showroom that's now a church. It was really stunning that they opened up the church for us to have the meeting there.
And the bishop was phenomenal in organizing it and supporting us.
And it was great because a lot of the Detroit techno people were there too, so it was a really interesting array of people. I think what's maybe because the Packard plant's history was one of providing so many new jobs for Detroit for so many years, that all 3 architects working on the Packard plant have made jobs, new kinds of jobs, a real priority in their projects. I mean, I don't think that the other 3 sites have overlooked that. But here it seems much more tangible when they talk about their programs. You can, well, I can actually read this here. It's amazing. I don't have to turn around.
The volume button became the forward button on the screen.
The volume button?
Yes, don't judge.
I wondered why she was
I
playing
have no
with the
idea
volume.
why. That's why I kept on hitting the volume. I accidentally discovered this.
Stan Allen in New York City has studied many American botanical gardens and discovered that the square footage of most botanical gardens is the same as the square footage of the Packard plant. I don't mean the footprint, but literally the square footage when you stack up the floors. And he's proposing that part of the Packard plant become a botanical garden with an aviary
and a greenhouse.
Greenhouses for growing plants below the roof, plants on the roof, but greenhouse growing beneath. So in a different way, another way of thinking about urban farming, shall we say. but also combining it with an aviary and other animal situations potentially. A team from Ann Arbor, Michigan, has looked at the potential of making new building materials from recycling materials in demolished buildings. They are talking about taking out all the infill in the Packard plant to create new aggregate materials, then researching those materials. So in other words, taking the Packard plant and making it into a research facility about how you would use recycled building materials in new forms. In other words, you're not ripping up a wood floor and sanding it and putting it down as a wood floor or a brick and reusing the brick, but actually pulverizing that brick and see how it might be combined with some sort of other
Aggregate.
Material to make a new building material. And then they propose to use those materials in new forms that are also on the site. And Greg Lynn from Los Angeles is proposing to give the Packard plant what he calls a haircut. He's going to take off the top 2 floors and put on 2 new top floors, make the bottom part mostly warehousing, a la Amazon, whoever else, everybody delivers from a warehouse these days. And then having a kind of corporate incubator research facility on the roof, different corporations, not just one, and university research labs that move around and engage these corporate facilities. But for all 3 of them, it's I'm not describing it very well, but for all 3 of them, there's a real concern about the kinds of jobs that would be involved in the programs that they've proposed.
And generated by the programs.
Yeah.
And I think that's it.
Oh, that's right. Oh, okay. So, you all know this. We don't have to say what this is. This is just to cue us that we're now going to do something really different. I was here last night for a reception. It was really great. You might recognize this as a postcard. This is, I'm a big fan of postcards. Anybody here who knows the magazine Log that I do? Log was conceived as a magazine that resists the seductive power of the mediated image. In other words, I'm tired of all these Photoshop renderings that architects are producing because they don't produce any conversation. They're just pictures. And I'm interested in the conversation, the exchange of ideas. And Monica and I thought, how do we tell the audience in Venice, most of whom will not have ever been to Detroit, something about the context in which these 12 projects come from. And we decided we would do a postcard contest called My Detroit, which most of you here probably knew about, and ask people to submit up to 5 photographs each of what they think is their Detroit, my Detroit. And then the photographer Camilo Jose Vergara, who's also a sociologist and has been photographing Detroit since 1985, coming back periodically, going back to the same site, documenting it again. He and I picked the 20 winners in January, and tonight we are announcing those winners and also showing you the photographs. We had 463 entries. We were thrilled by the response. They in themselves tell a really interesting story, and I think we're going to try to figure out how to somehow show all 463 photographs, maybe when the show comes here to MOCAD. We haven't talked to any of the photographers about that. But Camilo and I chose what I think are excellent photographs, but we also chose them very carefully to try to tell a story about Detroit, because on the back of each card will be 2-3 sentences telling a story that relates to the image. And we will have 100,000 of these postcards in Venice for visitors to the exhibition to choose from and take home with them for free. So it's a little bit of our gift to them for coming to the show. So we're going to do this alphabetically. And at the end, if any of the photographers do happen to be here, when we finish, we'll ask you to stand up. Monica, I don't know where the volume thing is. Can I see it here? I have to turn around. I'm really sorry.
No, that's it.
Oh, the first alphabetically is Sarah Jane Boyers, who's presently residing in Santa Monica, California. You did not have to be a resident of Detroit right now to enter the contest. We had entries from, I forget how many countries, several countries and many different cities, but I was also really happy that the majority were from Detroit and the surrounding communities. Derek Chang with the Belle Isle Aquarium. John DeVore of Royal Oak. This is what the city looked like last night, by the way.
It's beautiful.
It was amazing. Antoinette
Del Villano.
Del Villano, yeah, thank you. It's hard for me to read them from here.
I can read them if you want.
That's her.
Oops.
I don't know if she's actually sitting on the car. She might be one of those little girls.
Our 69 Plymouth, 1970. It's just beautiful.
Her father's on the car? Thank you.
Jennifer Garza Quen, Depot, the Michigan Central Station, 2012. Jeff George from Detroit,
I have to say.
House Fire.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I have to say something about this photograph. Do any of you know the work of Gregory Crewdson, who stages sort of traumatic scenes in suburban streets, in residential suburbs, like somebody being mugged when they're getting out of a car, or a house on fire, or any number of things? Both Camillo and I looked at this and said, my God, this is like a Gregory Crewdson photograph. Go ahead.
Another Jeff George from Detroit, Michigan.
There are two winners that each got
Yeah.
2 photographs.
Trouble Assets. Eric Herman from Ann Arbor, Dollar General at Lafayette Park. Julie Huff from Detroit, Mural and Steam Pipe from 2015.
I want to say something about this too. A lot of people submitted photographs of murals, and they were very beautiful murals and nice photographs of the murals, but there wasn't any context. The mural could have been anywhere, so it was very hard for Camillo and I to decide how to represent the mural in Detroit, because we must have had a dozen mural photographs, and they were all good. But this is the one we ended up with.
Bill McGraw from Dearborn, Michigan, is titled Ghost Baseball Fields from 2015.
Bill says this is a backstop from a former baseball diamond in a park here in Detroit. I believe him.
Ayana Miller from Detroit, Michigan, Lighting the Main Way, the Fisher Building, of course, 2015. So it's stunning. Ben Novak, Oak Park, Michigan, is the Penobscot block, also a recent photograph. Kevin Robinshaw, Detroit, Michigan, is titled Wedding Party, Michigan Central Station. This is one of my favorites.
Can I tell you what? every single person, when they saw this photograph, burst into laughter. And we thought that was a good sign.
Salvador Rodriguez, St. Clair Shores, Michigan, Belle Isle Bridge, 2012. Harold Scarcello, Southfield, Michigan. Glimmers of the Past is the Michigan Theater, a photo from 2010. Sue Showmaker from Brown City, Michigan. The title of the photo is Reality Ahead.
I have to tell a story about this photograph. I'm already using it because I gave a lecture for Monica at Princeton about about what we're trying to do in Venice. And I used this photograph as a good example about why imagination is so important, because reality is always right there, and you have to deal with reality, and reality is dangerous. So how do you use your imagination to deal with reality a little bit differently? I love this photograph.
John Sobczak from Bloomfield, Michigan. Enjoy Detroit, 2008. Sigdem Talu from Montreal, from Quebec, Canada. Objects Trouvés is, of course, a fragment of the Heidelberg Project, 2015.
But I really like the idea of meet me halfway.
Corinne Vermeulen, Hamtramck, Michigan. Diaz family and their 40th Chevrolet Fleetline, 2008. And then I think this is our last photo.
Yeah.
It's another Vermeulen, Ray Sean and his uncle's band, 2011. It's
I
wonderful.
love this
I
picture
love
too.
this. It's amazing. And I think if we have folks that submitted photographs or that are in the photos, we would love to. We didn't know any of the folks that submitted photos. We would love to get to know you. So if you could stand up for us, that would be fantastic. Please stand up.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think that's it.
Are we
right?
at the end?
I think we are at the end.
Oh, it says thank you. Well, wait. We have to summarize, don't we?
If you wish.
Well, it's still it's a work in progress, so it's difficult to summarize. But I want to say something very personal. I think Monica might feel similarly. She keeps saying we think alike. I don't think we do, but she keeps saying that.
We still haven't disagreed about something, so.
We will. When we started to do this project, we really felt we were doing a project, or I really felt that we were doing a great project for the Venice Biennale, that we were going to export the best of Detroit to Venice for 6 months and see what kind of conversation it started, what kind of great examples, ideas for Detroit could bring to the rest of the world. None of this has got a developer or a backer. No one's planning to build anything these architects are doing. I mean, these architects have said, sure, we'll think about this. There's no client. I mean, Monica and I have tried to scrape some money together to help them cover their expenses.
And we've told them things like, don't demolish the post office, that makes no sense.
Yeah,
But,
things like that. We've given them some guidance, shall we say. But
which sometimes they don't listen to.
no, they don't. But I think what's happened, and I think it's been really key as a New Yorker who is not as familiar with Detroit as Monica is because of her years in Ann Arbor. it's been really key that Monica put together this advisory committee. It totally changed for me what the Biennale is about. It's not just about starting a conversation in Venice about ideas for a 21st century Detroit or any 21st century post-industrial city. But now that it's coming to MOCAD in 2017, it feels like we've got two mints in one. You know, that we're not just doing a Biennale project, we're doing something else that I at least hope opens up a whole series of new conversations in Detroit about ideas for the city as we go forward.
Some of which may be good and some of which may be really bad.
Right. We don't expect you to love what we do.
We don't love everything that the architects are doing.
No,
either.
we don't. We don't expect anyone to love what these people are all doing, but you have to appreciate the passion that everybody puts into this to make it happen. So all of you here who have helped us so far, thank you. And I hope that there'll be many more of you who are, if you don't get to Venice and see the show between Memorial Day weekend and Thanksgiving, that you certainly will participate in the conversations that we hope this work will instigate
When it comes back.
when it comes here in 2017. Thank you for your attention.